In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to solve inequalities using multiplication or division. Now, in our solving order of operations, we have subtraction, addition, division, multiplication, exponents, and then groups. This falls in the second step. And we are looking only at having division or multiplication. Now, for this, we have a couple of properties to work with. Our first is the multiplication and division property of inequality. This is part 1. This property states that multiplying or dividing each part of an inequality by a positive number creates an equivalent inequality. In other words, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other, and it still holds its same value. So let's take a look at a couple of such examples. Our first one, we have m divided by 12 is less than or equal to a negative 5. So since we see division in this, we're going to use a multiplication form of this property. I'm going to multiply both sides of this inequality by 12. That gives me m is less than or equal to a negative 60. So on a number line, I have my negative 60 in the middle. I'm going to fill in my circle, and I'm looking at items to the left of that. Second, 3p is greater than or equal to 8 and 61/100ths. Since I see multiplication, I'm going to divide both sides of my inequality by that value of 3. This tells me that p is greater than 2 and 87/100ths. So, once again, going to graph this. I have 2 and 87/100ths as the center of my number line. I'm going to use an open circle since it cannot be equal, and I want items that are greater than this. I'm moving to the right. Our third one, 5 is greater than 1 1/4 c. Since this is multiplication, I'm going to divide by 1 1/4. Which tells me that 4 is greater than c. So, on my number line, I place 4 in the middle. I'm going to use an open circle, and since 4 is greater, I want everything that is less than this. And we can go through and do quick checks on these, but with the interest of having more than one property, let's continue on. Our second property is the multiplication division property of inequality, part 2, and it tells us when multiplying or dividing each part of an inequality by a negative number, the inequality signs must be reversed to create an equivalent inequality. And the reason for this is that the symbol that we use to denote negative is more appropriately called opposite. So if I'm multiplying or dividing by an opposite number, then I need the opposite inequality. If x is less than 4, okay, we can take care of that. If the opposite of x is less than 4, and I divide both sides by a negative 1, then x would have to be greater than a negative 4. For instance, if I had selected 0 in my original setup, the opposite of 0 is still 0. 0 is less than 4. If I select 0 here, 0 is greater than negative 4 still holds true. But that comes in from that concept of an opposite value. So let's take a look at solving some inequalities with this property. Our first one, 5 1/2 is greater than a negative 4t. Because I see multiplication, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 4. Since I am dividing by a negative number, I'm going to reverse the direction of my inequality sign and then carry out my division. So 5 1/2 divided by a negative 4 will give me a negative 1 3/8. So on my number line, in the center I'm going to place a negative 1 3/8. And my value t cannot be equal to it, so open circle, and I want values that are larger. Next, q divided by a negative 4 is greater than or equal to a negative 4 2/10. Since I see division, I'm going to multiply both sides by a negative 4, giving me Q being less than or equal to, since I'm multiplying by a negative number, I have to reverse my sign. Multiplying these, I get 16 8/10. So, on my number line again, 16 8/10. Fill in the circle at that point, and I want numbers that are less than it, so I'm moving to the left. Our last one, sometimes we get equations or inequalities that are quite simple. Negative z is less than or equal to 6 7/10, so I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 1. And that tells me that z is actually greater than or equal to a negative 6 7/10. So, place that on my number line, negative 6 7/10, fill in my circle, and I want items that are larger than it. Now, a thing of note in the second inequality given here, we had to reverse the direction of our inequality sign because we were dividing by a negative number. It did not matter that the number we were dividing or multiplying was negative. It was the fact that we were dividing or multiplying by a negative. In one of the problems in our first slide, number 1, we did have m divided by 12 is less than or equal to a negative 5. In order to solve this, I'm going to multiply by a positive 12. So even though this number is negative, I did not have to change the direction of my inequality sign. So how can we apply this math into something outside in the world? Let's say a student has a summer job that after paying all their taxes, they average about $7.75 an hour. The student hopes to be able to buy a new phone that costs $273 by the end of the summer. We need to write and solve an inequality to represent the number of hours the student must work to achieve this goal. So, we'll use h as our variable for the number of hours that are worked, and the pay is $7.75 times the number of hours. This will come in comparison to the $273 of the phone. Now, what we want to do is have that much money or more. So we want the 775 to be greater times h to be greater than or equal to 273. If it's equal, we will have just enough money to buy the phone. If it's greater, we'll have some money left over, maybe buy a few accessories. But what we see here in solving this inequality is multiplication. So in order to solve, what I'm going to do is divide both sides of the inequality by $7.75, leaving me with h needing to be greater than or equal to approximately 35 23/100 of an hour. Now, most places won't pay for like this. They'll pay by the half hour or the full hour. So we're going to say 36 hours. So if this student works 36 hours during the summer and saves all the money that comes, he or she will be able to purchase this phone. So we can see with solving inequalities, there's a lot of similarities to solving equations. The biggest difference comes here when we're doing multiplication or division. If we have to multiply or divide by a negative number in order to solve, we have to change the direction of our sign. On that, the processes are exactly alike. So have some good notes on this, ask questions, be able to use it.